Yeah, we back. We back. Now, I usually don't do this, right? I usually don't do this. This video was a pay-per-view, and I usually do pay-per-views because I only want to discuss certain things amongst the brothers, you know. Sometimes you got to close the curtain and we got to go in the back room and talk amongst each other, right? We can't have the outsiders and the foreigners all up in the conversation and things like that. But, you know, one of my good friends came to me. He was like, "Listen, bro, you know, you got to put this information out there. You got to give it to the people, man. You got to give it to the people." And due to the fact that I have a large segment of my audience that's also young men. I'm assuming young black men also, you know, in their college age and, 20s, things like that, early 20s, mid 20s, late 20s, the leaders of the future, essentially. And I know for a fact, if you're a young black man listening to my page, my YouTube channel, then your mind is on a different level, right? You're definitely going to be the leaders of the future for sure. So this is going to be a two-part video. In the first half, I responded to a request from a subscriber who wanted me to give my opinion on what I thought about African nations doing business and engaging in commerce with Russia. And in the second part, I gave my solution to the whole security situation or the military situation in Africa and across the world as it relates to black men. I laid out a framework that I think we could implement in the future, obviously not right now, but a long-term vision, right? That's why I place my emphasis on the young guys listening to my channel. I want the young boys to listen to the shit that I say, and y'all can implement it when y'all become leaders in the future. Keep this in mind. Remember where you heard it. Remember where you heard these concepts. So it's going to be a two-part video. First half, I talk about African relations with Russia, the positives, the negatives, the pros and cons. And the second half, I talk about how black men can become independent and self-sufficient and self-reliant in the arena of security and military cooperation. So yeah, like I said, in the beginning, we talk about the short term, and the second part of the video, we talk about the long term. So anyways, man, not wasting no time. Let's jump right into it. And like I say, I don't usually do this. I don't usually like to put out pay-per-views for the general public because I feel like those who support the channel and contribute to the channel, they should have that exclusive access, right? They should have that exclusive access. When we go in the back room and we talk in private, it should stay in the back room. But I made this exception just one time, right? This one time. And I may do a follow-up video to build upon what I had mentioned in my second half of this video, where I spoke about how black men can become independent and self-sufficient and self-reliant in the arena of security and military cooperation. I may need to do a follow-up and dive deeper on that. But anyways, man, let's jump straight into the pay-per-view. Enjoy the video. Yeah, we back. We back. Now, in today's video, we're going to be talking about my opinion, my thoughts on African nations doing business and buying weapons from Russia. We're going to talk about the positive and negative aspect of that interaction. As you already know, ever since the whole Ukraine fiasco, the Western media has been going 100 miles per hour. Russia, 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 Russia. 24/7, the Russian boogeyman. So in this video, I'm going to be giving my thoughts and opinions on that interaction, the positive and negative aspect. Now, I'm going to start with the positive aspect of African nations buying weapons from Russia. The number one positive aspect of that is it allows African nations to have easier access to a higher quantity of affordable weapons, reliable weapons. Yes, obviously, as we already know, the best position to be in is one of self-sufficiency, being able to mass produce your own weaponry, your own military technology. But at the current moment, there are African nations that are currently engulfed in war against adversaries, domestic and internationally. So they need weapons right now. Yes, obviously, we want to be able to mass produce our own weapons, but in this current moment, we need weapons right now. That's the fact of the matter. That's the current situation many governments are facing. Yes, of course, we want to produce our own food, but we need food right now. We got to eat right now. So that's the number one positive aspect, right? Easy access to affordable weapons in higher quantity in comparison to the so-called traditional Western allies who place a limit on the quantity as well as the quality of military technology they're willing to share with African nations. And on top of that, they charge you an arm and a leg, including strict conditions and policies which limit your independence as a sovereign nation. You see, these other nations, these other partners are not going to tell you, okay, if you want access to this military technology, you want to sign this military agreement, you got to throw a pride parade in the middle of the Capitol. You know, you have to establish these Western customs in your country in order to have access to this weaponry. The other partners are not really, they're not going to do that shit. So that's the second aspect of it, right? You are able to access a higher level of military technology at an affordable price without having to sacrifice your cultural sovereignty or have to bend over backwards and get charged an arm and a leg in order to have access to military technology, right? The next positive aspect is, like I mentioned before, Western nations typically demand the ability to influence your internal administration in order to do business, meaning that they want to have the ability to influence who you interact with. They want to have the ability to influence your culture. So if you do business with them, you have to adopt their rules and customs. You cannot do business or even interact with any of their so-called adversaries. It really limits your independence and your freedom of movement and your sovereignty in order to do business with the West, right? So a positive aspect of doing business with these other partners is you have more flexibility, you have more room to move around, you have more room to breathe, right? And this principle goes beyond geopolitics. This is also important in business in general. When you do business, you have to have multiple suppliers, right? You have to have multiple plugs. It's like, even if you run a drugstore, you got to have multiple suppliers in case they run into production issues. Your entire operation would collapse if your one and only supplier runs into any problems. So it's intelligent to shop around. It's smart to shop around for the best prices, the best deals. These are basic commandments of doing business. You know, this goes beyond geopolitics. This is common sense, to be honest. The next positive aspect is diversifying your friendships. It serves as a buffer to adversaries who may think twice before trespassing against you. And that's self-explanatory, right? That's self-explanatory. Now, at this current moment, African nations do not have access to nuclear weapons to serve as a deterrence against adversaries internationally, right? But due to the fact that they do have access to Russian weapons, that also serves kind of as a deterrent for Western governments that, you know, may think twice before trying to, you know, do any acts of aggression against African nations, because, you know, they don't really want to have a direct military confrontation with the Russians. So, you know, they move respectfully because they don't know if the Russian man is in the background. So that serves as a deterrence, right? That's like psychological warfare against the Western nations. It reminds me back when Christophe was in power, the king of Haiti, right? His relationship with Great Britain, it served as the deterrent against French aggression. And the Haitian Revolution in general is a great example of how the black men during that time weaponized the different European powers against each other, right? For their own personal interests. Playing the Spanish against the French, playing the British against the French, playing the Americans against the French. It was genius, you know, in terms of the black men during that time. And the same thing can be implemented in the present day. Playing the Americans off the Russians, playing the Russians off the Americans, playing the different powers against each other for your own personal benefit and your own personal enrichment. These things can be done if you operate in an intelligent manner. Now, let's talk about the negative aspects of this interaction. The number one negative aspect, I would say, well, depending on how you look at it, it could be a negative, but you will become isolated from interacting with all Western allies and Western institutions due to the fact that you are openly engaging with adversaries of the West. So if you're a leader who enjoys hopping on a jet, going to Paris, going to New York, going to London, and you enjoy having multiple bank accounts and hanging out with a bunch of white folk, you know what I'm saying? You are no longer able to do that. You cannot do that anymore. They're not going to give you any visas. You're not going to have access to the trappings of Western civilization. If your wife enjoys vacationing in California and shopping in Paris, she's going to be very upset with you when she can't get a visa due to your political ambitions. That's the fact of the matter. Now, the opposite can occur in terms of becoming dependent on one single supplier. Because if you become isolated from the West and all Western allies, then you may become dependent upon Russian military hardware and trade deals. Right now, in a perfect world, The ideal situation would be having access to all markets and being able to do business with whoever you want to do business with. But that's not the world we live in, bro. So African militaries need to begin reverse engineering the weapons they already have in their disposal and produce their own independent military technology so you can produce everything you need in-house in case you run into any issues with supply chains or political turbulence geopolitically. Now, let's jump into the second part of the video. Let's talk about the long-term goals, right? The long-term vision, right? I don't have any problem in the short term. You need weapons. There's security issues that need to be taken care of. You need weapons to go to war with the jihadists and protect yourself from the West. I get that. Stock up on weapons. I'm with that. But the long term should not be being dependent upon Russian military technology. The long-term goal should be self-sufficiency and self-reliance and military cooperation amongst African states worldwide. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the first person to think of this idea, but I think the long-term vision should be there should be a version of the United Nations peacekeeping force, but strictly for African nations, strictly for black men. There should be an organization. I don't know what it could be called. It could be called the International Defense Alliance, the Sovereign Defense Organization, the Global African Defense Network, whatever you want to call it, man. But essentially within this organization, it would kind of be like a secret society type of thing where all of our best and brightest minds, all of our military minds, our soldiers, our generals, our scientists, our business leaders, our mechanical engineers, etc., etc. Everybody who works in the field of defense and security around the world, we take our best and brightest minds. We take our resources from all over the world. We take soldiers from all different African militaries, and we all combine into this military force that is international. For example, you could be a soldier or a general in the Nigerian army or the Jamaican army or any army. As long as you are a black man, as long as you are a man of African descent and you pledge allegiance to certain key principles, such as your commitment to black unity, African unity, placing the collective interests of our people at the top of your agenda, being committed to the idea of living your life in a way that makes your ancestors proud. If you agree with these basic principles, then you can be part of this organization as long as you are a black man. And I don't think it's going to be a conflict of interest because, for example, the United Nations peacekeeping troops, they take military servicemen from all over the world, all different countries, all member states, right? But you can still be a military man in your home country, but you also double as a military man for the United Nations peacekeeping force. And this would be the international black man's peacekeeping force, right? It would carry out the same type of missions, peacekeeping missions, counterterrorism efforts. And also in the case of an emergency, like for example, if an African nation is attacked by an outsider or an adversary, then we can mobilize the troops to defend that nation, as long as they are a member state and their government makes a formal request for assistance. We could have over 1 million troops mobilized from the air, land, and the sea. Because think about it, bro. Think about the population size of the African continent, right? And then you got to add in the nations in the diaspora. And then we could also include the military servicemen in the, the United States Army as well. As long as they pass a background check and answer a few questions, we could add in those men as well. So we have an endless supply of manpower to choose from, to where even if only a fraction of black men join this organization, you could have an international army of up to 50 million people, 100 million people, right? Because you're working with over 1 billion people already, and the population is expected to increase by a lot over the next coming generations. So you could easily have an army of up to, I don't want to say the word army, you could easily have a defense force of up to 50 million people with the ability to mobilize up to like 5 million at a time anywhere in the world. So in the future, the long term, this should be the goal, right? So instead of having to go to the West or go to Russia or go to the UN, you can go to this international organization, this international defense force with member states that contribute, and we can carry out any military operations that we want, right? Like for example, in this Kenya situation where Kenya is being mobilized to go to Haiti, if we had this international defense force already mobilized, we wouldn't have to go to the, have the UN serving as a middleman, having the United States serving as a middleman. We could interface amongst each other and mobilize our own international defense force to go on a peacekeeping mission inside Haiti, for example. And we know this organization doesn't have any ulterior motives because we are the ones that created it, financed it, and maintain it. So we don't have to worry about any external interests being put into the pot. No, it's all us, by us, for us. And also, we could allow special membership into this organization for black men who may not be military men, but they still want to contribute in other ways. For example, our brothers who work in science, law, medicine, media, independent business. If they embody these same principles, then they can also become members of this international organization and contribute their expertise in advancing the agenda. And also, we should be using this organization as a launch pad to install some of our members into positions of leadership in terms of becoming heads of state and presidents of sovereign nations, right? So we can advance our agenda on the geopolitical stage as well and maintain our security interests internationally. And I think the biggest benefit of having an international defense force would be the sheer massive size of the force. I think the biggest militaries is what, like China, India, the United States, and I think they got like what, 1 million servicemen, 2 million at most, right? But with us, we have over 1 billion people to choose from, with many of them working age and military age. So like I said, if only a fraction of them were to join, you could easily have a standing defense force, a standing army of over 50 million people, taken from militaries across the world, black men from across the world, right? Able to join this organization. We already have the manpower. We already have the scientific minds. Many of our people have been highly educated at Western universities. They work in Western corporations. They work for Western defense companies. In fact, the goddamn CEO of Boeing Defense Systems is a black man by the name of Ted Colbert, right? So for example, imagine we had somebody like Ted Colbert down with the team, right? A black man who has a high extensive knowledge of developing and managing massive weapon systems. That's just one example of our underlying potential. But with the combined efforts of our mechanical engineers, our chemical engineers, our businessmen, our investors, our young men in college studying physics, because we should have a branch for the youth to create leaders for the future. One day in the future, we should be able to mobilize over 50 to 100 million troops anywhere in the world equipped with the latest technology. That should be the long-term goal, to be fully independent in terms of militarily, right? So you don't got to depend on the West, the Russians. You should be able to do everything in-house. But this would take the cooperation of black men across the world, across governments, across cultures. We need to be able to look at the bigger picture to defend our sovereignty across the world. To understand we have common interests and common enemies. Once we understand that, I promise you we'll be unstoppable. We have the population numbers, we have the size, we have highly educated individuals across the diaspora. The only thing we are missing is unity and cooperation. And to me, it's a no-brainer. I don't know what the fuck we waiting on. But in summary, man, like I said, there are positives and negative aspects to African nations doing business with Russia, but the long-term goal should be self-sufficiency and self-reliance, right? To limit your dependency and increase your sovereignty and power. I understand. In the short term, we need to have weapons on hand right now. But in the long term, you should be able to reverse engineer these weapons, manufacture your own weapons, and also create an international defense force where black men from across the world can voluntarily enlist in this international defense force to defend the sovereignty, power, and interests of our people, similar to the United Nations peacekeeping force. Right? They take servicemen, they take policemen from across the world and enlist them into this international armed defense force. It's no different. We just need to have one of our own, right? That should be the goal. That's my thoughts. Right? And I also believe that one thing I failed to mention, Russia can also help you secure better deals with the West, because the West, due to the fact that they do not want you interacting with Russia at all, it's going to be incumbent upon them to offer a better deal, right? So you don't want me to talk to Russia? That's fine. So give me a better deal, bro. Give me a better deal. Give me a better price. Give me better weapons. Give me better flexibility, right? So Russia not only serves as a buffer and a deterrent, but also negotiating power when you sit down with the Western forces, right? When you sit down with the Western governments, this gives you power in negotiations, right? So there's positives and negatives to this. And like I said, I never really talk about Russia that much because I only focus on our own issues, but somebody told me to talk about it. You know, I did a pay-per-view because, you know, these are controversial topics. The algorithm might not like me speaking this way. You know, they want to talk about the Russian boogeyman. So I don't want to put the channel in jeopardy. So I did a pay-per-view version. But that's my thoughts about it, man. You know, short term, do what you got to do. Long term, focused on self-sufficiency, self-reliance, and cooperation and unity amongst black states, black African states. That's my thoughts. That's my position. What y'all think? Anyways, man, it's your boy NelsonAmadeus Salim back in the Billy. Yes, indeed. Cash App up on the screen, and I'm gone. Peace.
Spending and get it back, never gon' get attached. Got shorty spinning back, changing my number. Stacking this paper, expanding my budget. Move like a prince when I'm stepping in public. Don't run up on me, they know I'm protected. Taking my power like fucking election. Young and I'm running shit like I'm Chayori. March on my enemies like I'm immortal. March on my enemies, dance on their body. Having my baby, she wanna come ride it. Tell me she love me when I'm up inside it. Pain in my heart, I could really get violent. Pain in my heart and it's never gon' change. March on my enemies, blow out their brains. Young and I'm poppin', you know how we own it. Pick up my phone when that money be calling. Pick up my phone when that money be calling. Hang up the phone if they talking retarded. Gotta get mines, you know how we started. Shooting to kill when I go for my target. Back in the building, I'm back in my bag. Know why they tripping, I know why they mad. Fuck how they feel, cause that's none of my business. Brand new Mercedes, you know how we living. Got shorty ride, she all in my Benz. Don't be surprised when that money come in. Look at lil' mama, she know she a 10. Comes to the crib and she told me come in. Stepping inside, make it rain, make it thunder. Hop on the jet, take a trip out the country. Changing my scenery, healing my pain. Can't see my face, but they know my name. Spending and get it back, never gon' get attached. Got shorty spinning back, changing my number. Stacking this paper, expanding my budget. Move like a prince when I'm stepping in public. Don't run up on me, they know I'm protected. Taking my power like fucking election. Young and I'm running shit like I'm Chayori. March on my enemies like I'm immortal. March on my enemies, dance on their body. Having my baby, she wanna come ride it. Tell me she love me when I'm up inside it. Pain in my heart, I could really get violent. Pain in my heart and it's never gon' change. March on my enemies, blow out their brains. Young and I'm poppin', you know how we own it. Pick up my phone when that money be calling.